Okay, so last thing for today is just rounding and then calculating with sig figs. So if you have to round because of sig figs or something, like say for this one, for number 1, you have 35.78, and I say, oh no, you have to round to 3 sig figs. So if you're going to round to 3 sig figs, that means you have to round down to the 10th. And you just want to make sure that if the number is after that is greater than 5, you round up. If, again, for whatever reason, I make you round for number 2 down at this point, if it's less than 5, you stay the same. And basically what happens if you round for number 3, if you're rounding here to the hundredths, if it's after 5, you round up by 1. Okay. So just make sure, like, you only have to round if you're actually forced to with sig figs, and you still want to make sure that you measure appropriately, because your measurements should always have the right amount of sig figs. But then again, if like you're doing calculations later and you have to round down, you can always do that. All right, so when you do math with sig figs, there's 2 different rules. You have, if you multiply or divide, you're going to look at the fewest total number of sig figs. If you add or subtract, you're looking at only decimal places, but it's always low man wins. So for example, if we do the first one here, and we put this in our calculator. So you put 2.8 times 4.55 times 0.10, you get 1.274 as your answer. And that's great, but that's not sig figs. So what you have to do is we're multiplying, so we go to our first rule, and we say the fewest number of sig figs wins. So you look at each of your numbers, and you say, okay, my first number has 2 sig figs, my second number has 3, and my third number has only 2. Because remember, this lead-in 0 doesn't count, and 0 does. What that means is fewest number of sig figs out of them all was 2, which means this number has to get rounded down. And where we need to round it is right here to the 10th place. So what we do is we round, and if we round appropriately, our final answer should be exactly 1.3. And that would be what you would want to write on your test and circle. I mean, you're certainly welcome to write this, but then you want to circle this one. Second one, right here, again, we're doing division. So we're looking at the first one. Sorry, we were having an announcement here. So we'll do our math here, and we're going to plug it into our calculator again. So we do 4.82 divided by 2.2, and you get like 2.190909, like repeating forever. And again, we need to round it. So we're going to look at our fewest number of sig figs. So again, the first guy here has 3 sig figs. Our second guy here has 2 sig figs, which means this guy has to get rounded down. And we need to round down to 2 sig figs, which means that'll take us to our 10th place. And that means our final answer would be 2.2. And then number 3, now we're doing the addition-subtraction version, which is just least number of decimal places total. So we do our math, 31.789 minus 10.2, and we get 21.589. Now we're looking at just decimals. Our first number has 3 decimals. Our second number has 1. That means our answer can only have 1. And we're going to end up at 21.6, if I can type correctly. So with these, you just have to really make sure, okay, first you do your math correctly. Second, that you're aware of where you're rounding to. So we're going to do one more with addition, and then we'll do a slightly more complicated one. They're not very common, but I'll just show you if you had to do it. So number 4 here, we're adding, so 145 plus 0.98 plus 21.016. So I get 166.996 is my answer. Just a nice number, but we have to sig fig it. So now we're doing addition subtraction, which means just decimals matter. So my first one has no decimals, my second one has 2, my third one has 3. That means my answer can have no decimals, excuse me, and that means our answer is 167, rounded. Last one here is when you're doing different operations. So it's fine if you're doing all multiplication division. It's fine if you're doing all adding or subtracting. But when you start crossing over, you're not okay. So the first thing you need to do is just do each part in steps. So I'm going to follow my order of operations, do what's in my parentheses. So what I get is, if I can move that, 5.76 plus 3.327. I get, I put it in wrong. Here, let's see this one. I got 9.087 times, and then I'm going to do my other guy, 19 minus 2.689. I got 16.311. Now, the issue is you can't just stop there. You need to actually do sig figs. So you have to do a sig fig for this first part, because you added. You have to do a sig fig for the second part, because you subtracted. And then you're going to finally do your last math. So if we look at this first part, we're going off of decimals, because we're adding. We have 2 decimals, 3 decimals. That means we can only have 2. So our answer is going to be 9.09 with sig figs. And then if we look at this second guy here, we have no decimals, 3 decimals, so that means this guy can only be 16. Now we can do our math. 9.09 times 16, I get 145.44. Again, looks beautiful, but now we have to do sig figs. So what we have to do is look at these numbers right here. Here, now because we're doing multiplication, we're doing whole numbers, looking at the total number of sig figs. So I have 3 sig figs in 9.09. I have 2 sig figs in 16. That means my answer can only have 2 sig figs, and this guy has to equal 150 with correct sig figs. So you do have to just be careful how you go about this. This is not common, but it does happen. So, end of today, or the big thing from today, make sure you understand accuracy, precision. Make sure you understand how to measure correctly, and make sure you know sig figs. We'll review it on Friday. We'll review it overall, but you just have to make sure that you're working on it.